Welcome to the 707, a weekly half-hour program produced by KRCB, a service of NorCal Public Media. The 707 features voices and stories from your community, stories that explore the natural world around us, and stories that show how we are connected to each other. I'm your host, Michelle Marques. Save the Redwoods League has been working to protect and restore California redwoods since 1918 by purchasing forests and surrounding lands. The founders of the nonprofit were inspired and appalled after taking a road trip along the newly constructed Redwood Highway, seeing beautiful redwood forests next to huge tracts of land that had been cleared of ancient trees, some more than 300 feet tall. Since then, the organization has saved more than 200,000 acres of redwood forest. They're about to add another 200 acres to that total. Jeff Stump is Director of Land Protection at Save the Redwoods League, and he's on the line with me to talk about a new addition to the Harold Richardson Redwoods Reserve property in the hills of West Sonoma County, north of Salt Point State Park.
Save the Redwoods League acquired the property from the Richardson family in 2018. It's currently 730 acres and was one of the largest old growth groves in private ownership in Sonoma County. So a really special place with really big trees that had been protected by the family for a very long time. And so, of course, we jumped at the chance to purchase it in 2018.
And what have you done with that property since then?
We've done a lot of learning. The reserve is a place where we conduct scientific research, focus on climate adaptation and fire resilience, which is, as you know, big for West County. And we've worked closely with the close neighbor, who is the Kashia band of the Pomo Indians, to understand the cultural values, and we've done a lot of stewardship. You can imagine a large property like that, especially with the wind events over the last couple of years, has been a lot of management. But finally, the most exciting part is that we've been working towards establishing a trail system so we can get the property open to the public and really usable, and in a way that is protective of all the different resource values there, but where we get to share that incredible resource with the public.
Stump says that the property contains old groves of coast redwoods, which are different from the giant sequoias.
One of the big differences between the two species of trees is how they reproduce. A coast redwood, as I think people, I live in the West County, so I see lots of this out here. You really can't get rid of a redwood tree unless you try really, really hard. You got to cut them down and burn them out, or they sprout back from the roots. And so it's a very resilient species of tree. Giant sequoia don't do root sprouting. Their mechanism is a little bit different because they're more used to fire. So they are, of course, the largest trees by volume. Like the General Sherman is the largest tree in the earth by volume, and they have incredibly, like redwoods, they also have incredibly thick bark, and they're built to withstand normal fire. And in fact, normal fire helps their cones open up, and it helps the seeds be more viable. And so you get a big production of little tiny giant sequoia trees after a fire. And then, of course, some of them develop over time, depending on the situation. In fact, it's interesting because redwoods also, coast redwoods are affected by fire. After a fire, their seeds they germinate at a higher rate. But of course, they don't only rely on the seeds germinating to reproduce because they sprout from the roots. So it's a really important, resilient species that we get to live in out here in West County.
Are you learning about how coast redwoods interact with their environment? There's a nearby branch of the Walla River there, and then, of course, the coastal fog that comes in.
Yeah, there's a lot of science around fog and water and the resilience of redwoods. And part of that is we at the League, our work right now is to revive the entirety of the redwood range. So we're talking about from southern Monterey County all the way to the Oregon border. And of course, then the giant sequoias. And to understand where it's most appropriate to put our resources, we're doing a lot of science. And just a couple of weeks ago, there was a whole crew of people that went out and climbed the trees and took I think they were coring some of the trees, but they were also looking at the at the upper canopies and understanding the overall health of the systems and understanding the different ecology, because the top of a redwood tree in Monterey County is much different than the top of a redwood tree in Del Norte County. In Del Norte, it can be a whole ecosystem with other trees actually living up in this giant canopy. Whereas down further south, where it's drier, it's a really vibrant tree, but it's just a redwood tree and all its associated critters. So we're understanding those differences. Sonoma County, we're kind of in the middle, sort of still on the drier end. And I think that changed in the 1870s when we, as humans, finished cutting most of the redwoods along the Russian River. What I've talked to folks about is that there were so many trees that it had its own ecosystem. And so it drew the fog in and slowed the fog down. And of course, these trees are so adaptive at grabbing water, whether it's causing it to drip onto lower branches on the roots, or actually having we're learning that there's fungi in the stomata at the top of the tree that help bring water into the tree. So there's so much we need to continue to learn about redwoods, which makes it really exciting to be in a position to protect, another 200 acres of property to help further protect this grove. And in fact, within that 200 acres is a 35 acre old growth grove itself. So very rare that we get the opportunity to protect some, 35 acres of old growth in one grove. Nowadays, we're seeing them sort of scattered, and there's still really big, beautiful, giant trees like the Clark tree on the Russian River, and there's a giant tree on our Monterey Redwoods property, but that was transferred to the county. But this is 35 acres, so it's pretty special.
This is just announced at the end of January. You have an opportunity to expand the original reserve. Tell me about this.
Yes, we have a contract to buy 200 acres of land, essentially all of the land between the public road, which is Tin Barn Road, and our reserve. So it's going to enable us to have more options of getting the public out. Right now, we have to go through an easement. And so now we're going to own the entirety of the property. And my colleagues that work in our Connect program who are really focused on getting people out to enjoy this redwood resource and understand, the awe that I feel every time I go out there. So we're going to be able to focus in and finish the job of opening up the property as a public resource. It's kind of up there by itself. It's close to Salt Point, but not next to it. There's a lot of public resources in the area, but this is not adjacent. So right now it's going to be it's a standalone reserve that the league will operate, and really excited to work with our partners and neighbors and donors to raise this money and really protect this new property.
Well, Save the Redwoods League has been able to secure an agreement with the Richardson family to acquire the nearby 200 acres. They still need to raise $4 million to pay for it. I asked Stump if he thinks they can achieve that.
Absolutely. And it starts with a good matching donor who's matching donations. So it's always a wonderful place to start when one of our donors steps up and said, well, I'm going to help you raise this money because I'm going to offer a challenge. NPR stations use that a lot.
Yeah, we know all about that.
So yeah, this is really doable. I mean, we are blessed to work across the state in the Redwood Range, within California, but people of West County understand how important these resources are. I know that because, again, I live out here near Occidental. And so folks, I think, will rally. But yeah, we'll get this done. That's one of the things I'm really proud of our organization is taking a big, it's not a big risk, but taking a risk and stepping out, making commitments, and then following through. And we'll acquire this before the end of November for sure.
Tell me a little bit about the wildlife that's there on the Richardson Redwoods Reserve.
Yeah, it's really incredible and mixed because, again, this is much of it is intact old growth, right? So it has the complexity that comes along with an old growth forest. And so it provides a really wonderful wildlife corridor for the sort of the typical species that you and I see and think about, and mountain lions and deer, and I've seen bobcat there. But it goes beyond that because it's both species up in the canopy and then species that live in the really lush fern forest underneath, right? And so we've done a couple things. I'll get back to the species, but our staff has been working really hard on stewardship issues and fire resilience. So our first prescribed burn, a broadcast prescribed burn within an old growth grove, which is exciting, working with our partners. And so it's kind of opening things up. And so now we're seeing more about this habitat, and you can actually see through an old growth grove, right? And so oftentimes there's so many trees that you can't see through the grove. You can't see what's there. All sorts of amphibians, yellow-legged frogs, a couple kinds of newts. There's 2 species of bats that live in one of the giant trees that has the goose pen, which is that burned out base of the tree. It's called goose pen because I think the original Californians kept geese in them because it was like this natural place, right? But essentially it's a hollowed out part of a redwood tree that's part of the burn cycle, and then fungus attacks the burn part, and then it's like over the hundreds and hundreds of years of these trees, it kind of hollows out. But the tree still lives because, of course, it's living on the outside. And so within those, there's 2 species of bats, and I'm sure there's other things. There's tons of different fungus. Just a really incredible resource.
From fungus to fish and forests to meadows, we'll hear more from Jeff Stump, Director of Land Protection at Save the Redwoods League, in the next segment of the 707 on KRCB. We'll be right back.
KRCB is Sonoma County's NPR station. Wondering what makes us stand out? It's simple, our unwavering commitment to this community. Morning Music, hosted by Brian Griffith, sets the perfect tone for your day.
Brian here with you on Sonoma County's NPR station.
As the sun climbs high, join Doug Jane for Midday Music.
Doug Jane with you. Thanks for tuning in.
It's the soundtrack of Sonoma County. Then, stay informed with All Things Considered, featuring insightful reporting from the KRCB newsroom, ensuring you're always in the loop.
For Manzana, the company that helped keep Sebastopol's famous Gravenstein apple alive, their 103rd year in business will be their last.
Your home for the best in local news and music. Because when the community sings, we're here to listen. Your radio, your stories, your station. KRCB 104.9, Sonoma County's NPR station.
Welcome back to the 707 on KRCB. I'm your host, Michelle Marques, and I'm talking to Jeff Stump, Director of Land Protection at Save the Redwoods League. The nonprofit is adding an additional 200 acres to the Harold Richardson Redwood Reserve in the hills of West Sonoma County, protecting habitat for wildlife. Stump says this property also encompasses an important watershed.
This is a really important area for the Walala River. We're protecting essentially the entire top of one of the watersheds that leads down into the Walala, and we're going to really have a positive impact on delivering cold, clear water to the Walala, because then, folks have been working for quite some time on removing siltation and so trying to get our anadromous fish species back. So coho salmon, steelhead are really becoming vibrant here, and so it's important and fun to be able to make it a positive contribution to the river.
Yeah, I went out to Dry Creek. Gosh, it was in October, and I saw them spawning like big steelhead, and it was
Isn't that amazing?
Crazy to see that. Yeah,
it's prehistoric. I've seen them down in Pine Gulch in Bolinas, and it's just remarkable. Giant steelhead just holding their
huge.
Yeah. and then they go back out to sea, of course, right? And so they go back and live their life and come back the next year.
You talked a little bit about community access. How long does a process like that take? I mean, building trails is tough. Do you do this in stages? Can you just bring people out to certain areas? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. It's a long process because, the league had to do some learning at Harold Richardson. This was the first time that we acquired a property that was basically on its own, where we would be opening and operating a property for public access. Usually we work with our really tremendous local partners like Sonoma County Regional Parks, and with funding from Ag and Open Space, or with California State Parks. And we partner, we buy properties that adjoin parks, and then we work with them to develop plans and open trails. And sometimes we pay for the work, sometimes our crews do the work, sometimes it's a partnership. But in this case, we don't have those natural adjacent partners. So we've gone through a really comprehensive planning process. We've brought experts out. We've done some trail building. But what we discovered was that in 2018, when we acquired the property, we didn't acquire legal access. So essentially, we made a bit of a mistake, because when you look at the tax rolls, you can see the property goes all the way up to the road. But in fact, when we had it surveyed, there was a gap between our property and the road. Now, the family was great. They worked with us and gave us a license agreement, so we're able to take people out. Right now, we take people out through reservation, but that's not the same as, you know, having a protected property that's open for you and I to go to on a weekend. So it's really nice to be able to take school groups out, and we do that often. One of my colleagues takes kids out who don't have access to the wild, and we do some overnights with some all girls trips, which is super exciting. But the goal is to have it open. And so now that we're acquiring that land between the road and the reserve, we're going to control the access ourselves. So it'll still be measured. You know, we want to ease into this, because the goal is to have a reserve that's protected ecologically and available to the people, you know, to the public, so we can share that incredible experience. I bet folks in West County know that when you walk into a redwood grove, life just slows down. The noise kind of everything gets silent, and you can walk around in these incredible groves in silence and just, you know, bathe in it. And that's the kind of experience that we're hoping to share.
And the property that you're adding, it also has sort of fields and other like non-grove areas as well, right?
Yeah, it's mostly forest, but it's a true West Sonoma County, off the coast, mixed forest of redwood, Doug fir, tan oak, and pepperwood or bay tree. The old timers call it pepperwood, but bay tree. But there is some meadow too, and those meadows are very important habitat, because while an old growth tree can host a northern spotted owl, they also need territory to hunt, right? And so you can hear both great horned owls, and sometimes I've heard spotted out there too at night hunting. And so they fly through these meadows, and you know, there's all sorts of critters there, voles and such, that they get to feed on. So it's a bit of a mix, mainly redwoods, and like I said, this incredible 35-acre grove that is really amazing to work towards protecting. But it's kind of it's a neat mix, and so it has multiple different habitat types and opportunities for wildlife.
Tell me about your relationship with the Kashia Band of Pomo Indians and how you bring them into this.
Well, we are working closely with the Kashia on this property and also on our Sonoma Coast Redwoods property. You know, it's a two-way street. We are learning from them, and I think we're teaching the tribe, and their staff is just wonderful. So we work with them on our prescribed burns. We'll do cultural surveys. In fact, we're going out with the new tribal chair in a couple of weeks to show them the 200-acre opportunity. So it's a really close relationship. We're working on deepening that. Like I said, I get out with their staff, Anthony Macias, who's their TIPO, or their tribal historic preservation officer. And every time I go out with Anthony and his team, I learn 3 or 4 or 5 new things about their culture, about the environment. And I hope that we're also giving back and helping share our learnings about climate and management. And so that partnership is strong, and it's getting stronger. And we really enjoy working closely with the tribe.
How does this reserve help you understand more about climate change?
Well, we are focused on scientific research around climate, but what we do know already is that an old growth tree, an old growth forest, stores the most carbon of any forest type in the world, even more than the Amazon. So it's an incredibly important resource in California. And that really speaks to our goal of reviving the entirety of the range, whether through its working forest easement or working to protect reserves like this property. Protecting redwood trees is, you know, one of our most important resources for climate on the coast, right? So these trees grow fast, they hold carbon for thousands of years. You know, if we let them,
And then when we talk about old trees, how old are the trees on this property?
There's a range. So within the reserve, I think the oldest tree is probably 1,600 years old. And so it's one of the largest and oldest trees in Sonoma County. It is battle scarred. It has burn marks. It has reiterations that have grown and then died, and then new reiterations that have grown. It's such an incredible tree. It has, all these trees have character. But right alongside are these incredibly resilient second growth trees that have, that were cut early on and grow really fast and already have late seral characteristics, which means, their upper branches are starting to flatten out and get really big. And so they're providing habitat already. Yeah, so it's a range from young to some of the oldest and everything in between. But there are, numerous 1,000-plus-year-old trees on that property.
Stump says that Save the Redwoods League hopes to finalize the purchase of the additional acres by November. You can learn more about the Harold Richardson Redwoods Reserve and other projects online at savetheredwoods.org. I'm your host and producer of this program, Michelle Marques. This show is a service of NorCal Public Media. Our president and CEO is Darren Lachelle.